Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting. I just wanted to say I'm glad you came out on this gloomy night. I know it's rainy and a lot of us don't like to drive in the dark, including me lately. I am Paula Kirkowski, and I would just like to say thank you very much for coming. I have sent out a few emails about membership because we're going to be having membership, which is due the very end of December for our next year. So I just want you to know that, it's coming. If you have a need for a gift from one of your children because you have everything, tell them, hey, pay for this. It's great, I also have an announcement for the Castiglia Arts Center, which is the next building over upstairs on the second floor. We would like to have the juried artist. If you are a juried artist already, to sign up to do the shows. I have it broken down into different months. Right now, I have Melissa Buckley up there with her fiber work. And then I also have our mouth painter, our famous mouth painter. She's been published on the opposite wall, and that's Nancy Hall. So I just wanted to see if we could start filling up the months that we're there. You're there for 2 months. You need 10 pieces of work. Jack has also, and we've purchased from him, he made these gorgeous pedestals. If you didn't attend last month's, what do you want to call it? The exhibit. Please take a look around. It's a great place to show your work. It's open for tours. It's open for classes. So don't hesitate. Get your name on the list and, have your stuff out there. I'd rather see that than somebody that doesn't belong to the campus end up showing their work there. So it'd be great if we can. Yes, Lisa. Yes, it is always locked when there's nobody around teaching classes or anything, because a lot of us that do teach classes there, we try to let the people know, oh, you're taking a lunch break now. Look at the artwork on the walls. It's done by juried artists. Some of them have actually put like a little bio on the wall. It's a secure place to show your work. The place isn't left just open where anybody could walk in the building and grab a piece of artwork. Okay. Yes. It costs nothing. And that's the beauty of it. There's not too many places that artists can show for nothing. And I think it's great that you could show on the Roycroft campus. If it's not open, for some reason, when you want to go, you call the office and somebody will let you in. If you're there with a group of friends or relatives from out of town, they'll accommodate us. And it's happened in the past. So it's accessible if you want to bring in small groups to show off your own artwork and talk about your artwork, or you've got prospective buyers of your artwork, use it to your advantage. Okay. Let's see, exhibit. What was the last thing I was supposed to say? I don't know. I maybe cell phones, please. Your cell phones, please put them on silent. Meeting stats. Snacks. Okay. See, I can't hear either. Okay. We like you to stay after the meeting. We like you to mingle. We like you to socialize with each other, ask questions, build your friendships, network. So when you're doing that, please come with something that you may want to share as far as a food. Tonight, Lisa baked brownies. So whatever. So we'd like you to stick around, and get to know your neighbor that's sitting next to you. Maybe you don't know him very well. Okay. So I will hand this off to Robin, and she'll have our guests for this evening.
It's really great to see things moving along as they are, and to see so many people here again tonight. It seems like there's more opportunities opening up for artists on the campus. We have some new folks and younger folks here. We want to grow through the years, right? We have a great diverse group of many different kinds of artists. And anyway, I'm tickled pink tonight to be here again myself. My name's Robin Yates. I want to introduce Kelly Barone. She's amazing. She's she's teaches, she does watercolor work and pen and ink work. And I'm thrilled to well, we are thrilled to have her here because, and I know she's very willing to share. So I'm just, at this point, I'm just going to hand it over to Kelly.
Hey, hi everybody. Okay, I wasn't sure it was on. I am Kelly Barone. I am online and in my studio. My name, I use Whimsy by Kelly. I have a studio in Allentown and I have been making stuff since I could break into my mom's cupboards. One of my earliest memories is actually climbing on the kitchen counter because I wanted to get the markers out, and instead I knocked the scissors out and I had to go get stitches. But my mom's like, you were 4, like you were into everything. I used to like to draw a lot when I was little, and I wanted to be an architect. I will show you this. I recently kind of resurrected that a little bit. I wanted to be an architect because I liked to draw houses. But then somewhere around middle school, they told me that I had to do math to become an architect. And that was it for me. A couple of years ago, when my mom passed away, my dad handed me a box and he said, do you want this? And I said, just what I need, more junk to take home and find a spot for in my apartment. And I'm like, sure, whatever. And I took it. And then a couple months later, I opened it up and I realized that it was all my old sketchbooks from when I was little, and my mom had saved them all these years. So I started making calendars, and I took all the little house sketches that I had these visions for, and I decorated them and made them into gingerbread houses. So that's kind of the earliest thing I remember drawing, that and prom dresses, because I wanted to be an artist, but everybody would always say, what do you want? What kind of artist do you want to be? I didn't know anything about what kind of artist I could be. So I would say fashion designer, okay, because I knew that was a type of artist. I have no fashion, none at all. I wear jeans, I wear t-shirts, right? Like this is my most artsy outfit, and my daughter picked it out for me. That just wasn't my niche. So everyone's like, maybe you should get a real job. So I did. I worked in corporate for 14 years. I was a corporate trainer. I worked for 1-800-Flowers, and I was constantly surrounded by flowers and things like that. And in that time, I did a lot of botanical drawing. I started to draw flowers and paint flowers, and it's not that I'm fully self-taught, because I take every class that I can get my hands on whenever I can, because I always think that I can learn something even if I already know how to use that medium, that I'm going to learn something from that class, no matter what it is. But I took every art class that they offered in the Kenton School District, and then I made some up and made them let me take independent study. And I took art classes in college, but then I went on and I did, boring corporate-y stuff for a long time. But I still continue to draw, and I still continue to paint. Some of my favorite things to paint were like local stuff. So I have this big, huge binder of things that I used to paint. And like, you can see, like, I have these sketches, and a lot of them tend towards the architectural, because that's what I wanted to do. And we have, and something that no one ever talks about, is we have some of the most gorgeous architecture in the whole country right here for us to look at. And churches, right? We have so many. Something I just recently learned is that, like, back around the Pan Am Expo, we had more churches per capita than anywhere else in the world, which kind of blew my mind, but makes sense now. I can see, I think, 12 from my apartment building window. But I never really put away the pens and the paints and things like that. But I did have a really high stress job. And somewhere around there, I found Zentangle. And I know, Paulette, I know you know what Zentangle is, because I taught it at your gallery. Paulette was one of my first people that I walked in, and I'm like, hi, can I teach for you? But I found Zentangle literally on a business trip to the Philippines. I didn't have anything to do in the middle of the night and I couldn't sleep because I was jet lagged. And I started looking through stuff. And for those of you that don't know, Zentangle is art for stress reduction and relaxation. And it is done using repetitive patterns, which is super fascinating to me. And it's stuff like this. So I went and I got my certification so that I could teach it. Sure. I went and I got my certification in Zentangle so that I could teach it. I went to Rhode Island and I spent a week with the people who had created the method. And I still do a lot of it. I do a lot of teaching with it. I work with veterans. I work with, I have a group right now of young women who come in who have eating disorders, and they use it for stress. But it's also fun and it makes pretty stuff, which is always nice. And so that was kind of a focus for a while. And once I got my certification, I decided I wanted to open an art studio. And that was what I did. I opened a studio and I taught there. I think I had that studio open for 6 years. And then my son was injured and he's a quadriplegic now. But he had a spinal cord injury. So I took some time off and I started to do other things. And when he was in the hospital, I fell back in love with watercolor. I'd always kind of painted and I'd always kind of done stuff, but it was stuff like this, which I love, and it's kind of sweet and kind of pretty and whatever, but it's not all that exciting. And a lot of the other stuff I was painting was architectural stuff and local icons and things of that sort, which is nice and it's pretty. And truthfully, I think in here, this piece right here, which is Delaware Park, is probably the most popular piece I've ever done. And I've sold more of these prints of this than anything else I've ever made, which is nice. But other people do a lot of local stuff and other people do a lot of local icons. And I really wanted to, kind of find something that was more me. And so I've played with a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of ways to kind of incorporate a little of this, a little of that, a little of this. And I still love botanical drawing. I do a lot of that. I teach, I've taught 3 series of free botanical drawing classes online now. That's what I started doing during the pandemic because everybody was home and everybody was looking for things to do. So so I do things like this. I'm launching a Kickstarter next Tuesday for my book. I'm doing a book in botanical drawing. I basically take it and break it down into simple steps of usually like 5 or 6 steps to create flowers and things like that. So I'm really excited about that. Let's see, what else do I do? But all these things kind of came together about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago. I took a class in Neurographica, which is all about line work and color and fun, exciting things. And when I was doing it, I started to play with my water-based markers. Only I started using them as watercolor because they just weren't like I said, I love the sweetness and the delicateness that you can get and the transparency that you can get with watercolor, but they're not very vibrant and they're not always as bright and shiny and sparkly and in your face as I like stuff to be. So in the process of doing all of that, I discovered that I could use my markers and I could use them to kind of create a watery effect, which was fun and exciting and something a little different and something I didn't see a lot of people doing. And yes. I have at times, yes. It's funny you say that because this piece right here was done with that, right? Just kind of playing with it and turning it into, a water-based design just with pen and ink. So I tried doing the same type of thing with, I actually had Ecoline markers is what I started playing with. And I really loved the vibrancy and how exciting they were and how much more pop I could get than just using, you know, my Daniel Smith watercolors, which are lovely, but weren't giving me what I wanted. So I started to play with stuff, and I realized that what I really wanted was I wanted stuff that had a lot of depth, like a lot of depth. And that's kind of where this stuff started to come into play. So I already knew I wasn't happy with the watercolors that I could get my hands on, but I also wasn't really happy with markers because I like to paint. So it wasn't quite the same thing. So I started making all my own watercolors. I tried to bring like everything that I could think of to kind of like show you examples of everything that I do. So I make all my own watercolors now, which is not as hard as it sounds. I like to cook, so it kind of feels a lot the same way. I use my grandma's mortar and pestle because I never did get around to using it for garlic. So the difference is, like, if you look at these are a lot more vibrant than like the stuff that I could get here. And I'm sure there's other colors that would have been brighter than these, but I haven't found any that are as bright as the ones that I make myself. And I have a friend who lives in Toronto who is a flight attendant who I can make go to Tokyo to the pigment store for me and bring me presents. So I can make all kinds of fun things. She actually just brought me back a little teeny tiny packet of bright blue powder, which is that brand new blue color. I don't know if you've heard about it. They just discovered a new blue. And she brought me this it's a little baggie. And I'm like, how much trouble do you get when you walk through customs with little baggies of powder in your pocket, right? And she's like, there's always questions. But so I'm going to make that into a paint, and even the big paint companies aren't using it to make it into paint yet. So that's something I'm really excited with. But I started to play with making my own paints, and then I started doing these. And the way that I do these, most of them are done on handmade paper. Not all. I also really like hand mule watercolor paper and Clairefontaine, but I really like a paper that has a lot of texture. So what I usually do is I take paints that I've made myself, and I throw a ton of water on the paper, and I just start playing and laying down color. And sometimes I have an idea in my head of where it's going to go, and sometimes I don't. And I just will sit and I'll listen to music, and I'll kind of let it develop on the paper. And then I leave it and wander off to something else because I have really bad ADHD. And I'll come back and I'll look at it and I'll be like, oh, I see mushrooms, or I see a butterfly, or I see a moth, or whatever it is that I might see. And it's very much like laying in the grass and looking up at the clouds like you used to when you were little. What am I seeing here? What can I make come from this? So then I usually take watercolor pencils, like the cheapest, lightest, worst watercolor pencils I can find, because I don't want them to stay. I want them to disappear, and I start to block stuff out. And I've spent a lot of time looking at stained glass. We have the Stained Glass Association right at Trinity Church on Delaware, which is like a half a block from my studio. So I just wander in there and I make them let me look at stuff all the time. And I have friends that are stained glass artists, and I make them let me look at stuff. So I really decided when I started doing this that was how I wanted it to look. Coming back to that dimension and that want to have things, I don't want it to be flat, right? So first I put that down, and then I kind of blocked that out. And like in this case, I saw the mushrooms, so I started like penciling those in with the watercolor pencils. And then I do come back in with another layer or 2 or 17 of watercolor, however much it requires. And then I come in with those Ecoline markers again, right? And then I'll use them to kind of get a point, or maybe I want something super bright and super vibrant to create that little bit of like interest. You know, so often we don't think about the fact that behind here where we're looking at the glass, we see these random kind of ethereal shapes, and they're trees or cars or a street sign or something. And we can't see what it is, but we do get the color coming through. And that's really what made the difference for me, was realizing that that stuff that's behind there is as important as the color in the glass. So I do that. And then when I'm done, I take ink, and that's when I come in and I start to add in all the leading, right? And I tend to use a dimensional ink like a glaze ink, or one of the thicker inks that you would apply with pointed pen. And I go in and I add all the lines. And over time, the lines have morphed on from these super simple lines to stuff like these ones, which also have a lot of the line work that's similar to like my Zentangle work and my botanical drawing work. And what I think really sets my work apart a little bit is because I have that I place an importance on both the actual structural integrity of the flowers. When I add flowers and things in there, I think it's really important that they look real-ish, but they also look like they're made out of stained glass. And it really comes down to the shapes of the components. I want to make sure that when I put something down that looks like stained glass, that if a stained glass artist were trying to make it, that they would use a shape that is actually that shape. They wouldn't try and cut something that no stained glass artist would ever try and cut, because when you put it down, it doesn't look right. And you can fit it. I mean, there's definitely a random shape or two that you can squeeze in that just, it doesn't jump off the page and you're like, that would never work. But if the majority of it would work, then it makes sense. That makes sense? So that's kind of how I got here. Yes. This one, yes. Yep. So I put down masking fluid and tape. And I usually only do that with something that I know that you're going to be able to see the edges on, because I like them to be super crisp. And then I also go over that edge with my dimensional ink as well. I don't know what else to tell you. It is a lot of fun because it doesn't give me time to get bored, right? Like I said, I have really bad ADHD, so I'm all over the map and I'm all over the place. And I'm like, I'm bored with this now. And then I'll come back to it 3 years later and I'll be like, oh, I guess I should finish.
Been doing this for a long time.
A lot of local stuff. Mostly local stuff. I teach a lot of classes. Like I love lettering, so like I do a lot of lettering classes, and then I do a lot of the botanical pen and ink. But the painting has mostly been local stuff. Random pet portraits sometimes, but mostly a lot of home portraits too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, which has been one of the big pieces, because like I said, that love of architecture, nobody cares if when I draw the line's not straight if we're not actually trying to build it, as long as it looks like their house. And I get a lot of people who will be like, my parents are moving and they've been in their house for 60 years. I want to be able to, give them something that they can take with them to their new house in Florida. And so I've done a lot of that for a long time. I will do some that are a bit bigger, but then I end up finding myself like crawling over stuff, and and then I inevitably stick my hand in it, and then there's a lot of swearing. It's usually like that very last part, I like drag my arm through it. Yeah. So most of the time, the good news is especially when they're as busy as some of these, nobody notices. Nobody sees this much.
You ever tried and you had any luck with color?
I have them. I think they're super fun to play with. I will add little bits and tiny pieces to certain pieces, like this one right here. I have, if you look on the key, you can see I added just a little tiny bit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But anything more than that, I find they're super distracting and they don't create the effect that you want it to, right? They're fun to play with. I have this great set that I bought from Germany from a girl. Her website is Lissy Linka, and they're beautiful. They're absolutely stunning. I don't do anything but play with them. Like I'll sit there and I'll just like dip my brush in it, and then I'll rub my brush on the little pan and watch the colors all shimmer and sparkle, and then I'll rinse my brush in the water and watch the mica swirl around in it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not getting anything done today. I'm just gonna sit here with my tea and play with the paint water. Try not to drink. They're really not, and they're pretty. They're just they're better in theory, I think, right? They're, like I said, they're fun to play with, but I've not had like incredible results with them in any way. So. Now I've done a little bit here and there where like I'll show somebody how, oh yeah. I'll show somebody how like you can use the Eco line to use it like a watercolor or something. I've shown a little tiny bit I taught a watercolor retreat, and I kind of showed them the idea of throw your color down and then try and find something in there that you want to build from there. But it would have to be such a long class. It would have to be like 2 years long, because it's probably like 17 different techniques all thrown together and swished together to get the results that I do. Yeah. So mostly, so it's,
There's like aquamarine and there's navy.
hold on, I have a picture. Let's see if I can find it. Okay.
Get people to, to understand what we're about. Like, come here, all excited about purple, get just excited. So
Right?
I want to know about blue.
Let me see if I can find it. So we're in.
No, I know.
Well, I mean, it's Yin Min Blue. It's
Cobalt.
It's like a cobalt, and it's super pretty. I'll come around and let you see it on my phone.
But it's bright.
It's really bright.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. Right. So this is my project for the next couple months, as I'm gonna start playing with this. But I have to do it in really teeny tiny batches because this is all I have. And apparently this little bit of powder, here, can they see it on the thing? There we go. This little bit of powder was like $90. And I'm like, oh, all right. So she said she'll get me more if I, but anyway, so yeah, it's pretty exciting. And the fact that none of the big companies are doing anything with it is extra fun. So, yeah.
Just go into your own thing. Say you wanted more vibrant colors.
I wanted more vibrant colors and kind of cheap. Right? Because really when it came down to it, I realized that I could buy the pigment and I could make so much more paint for such a small amount, or for such a small amount of pigment, than I could to go buy a tube of paint. I walked out of Hyatt's, which I love. All hail Hyatt. But I walked out of Hyatt with a bag that, no lie, was this big. It was long and skinny, and it had one paintbrush and it had 2 tubes of paint in it. And I had spent $142. And I was like, okay. And I actually had made a post that's really funny. And it says, what non-artists think $150 worth of artist supplies looks like. And I took a picture of like somebody's craft room. And then I'm like, what it actually looks like. And it's this little tiny bag. And then when I realized that my paints did everything the other paints did, and I could put more color into them, it was just kind of like a done deal. And I mean, it's definitely messy. My paints are never as pretty as the ones that like, I did bring a pan of them so I can show you. But I do them and I put them in these cute little suitcases. Right. And mine are never quite as neat as the like commercial manufactured ones are going to be. They have splotches and smears and stuff on them, but the colors are better. Not to toot my own horn, but they really, I mean, they give you things that I just wasn't able to get someplace else.
Say, okay, I need blue, and you make like 2 or 3 blues at a time. Am I-
No, it really kind of, it's more of a, I tend to make paint once or twice a year because it's really messy. And then I get it all over my studio and I can't do anything else because then I'm like setting something down and then there's a smear of blue on it because I didn't wipe up the table as well as I thought I did. And you know, it's just everywhere. The big part is that you have to let it cure unless you're, you know, giving it to people in like gelish kind of form. If you put it in pans, it has to dry, and it has to dry in layers. Because if you pour it all into a pan and then you don't let it dry in layers, it's just going to kind of all like goop out, and the top will be hardened and the center won't, or you'll have air bubbles or whatever. So yeah. So it's really a lot about curing time. So usually I make paint in February and then usually sometime over the summer. Yeah, I was supposed to have a calendar come out this week, but my son is in the hospital, so I did not get to that this week. But I should have one by next week. You can find me online. I have Instagram, I have Facebook, and I have a website. I do. I did. I brought cards. I remembered cards. I almost forgot cards. I'm like, that is bad planning.
Are you in your studio a lot during the week?
I am. I'm usually in my studio every day except Mondays. I tend to take Mondays off. And then weekends are random. I'm either there or I'm doing a show or teaching a class or something like that. Yeah.
Where do you teach your classes?
In my studio, I can seat up to comfortably. I can, depending on the class, like I can teach a Zentangle class for 30 because we only need a little tiny spot. But I can do painting classes for like 22 people in there. So it's nice.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
You're
Does
welcome.
anybody else have any questions? She'll be here. Please,
Yeah, absolutely.
please do relax. There's some snacks in the back. And thank you all again for being here. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.